Hi, and welcome to the Adoption's Truth podcast. Our goal is to spread the awareness of the tie between adoption and mental health. Many people are affected by adoption, whether you're the adoptee, adopting parent, birth parent, or maybe even a friend or family member. We hope to continue to educate and help people understand how important mental health is when it comes to adoption. Enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, sorry to stop you right here, but I just want to say a few things before we get started with the podcast. First off, thank you so much for everyone that reached out and that was very supportive with episode 1. I greatly appreciate it. If you didn't get to listen to it, head on over and check it out, whether you're on iTunes or you're on the website. And hopefully by now I should have it up on a third platform for you guys. But I also want to say if you are listening to it on iTunes, I would greatly appreciate it if you would just take 20 seconds out of your day, rate it, and give it a review. It really helps to continue to grow this channel and reach more and more people that can help with this area. So, again, thank you guys so much. And if you're not following us, we are on social media, so go over and hit the Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It's Adoption's Truth. Go over there, follow us. We'd really appreciate it. And I will let you guys finally now listen to the episode. Enjoy this podcast with Pattie Moore.
My name is Pattie. I am an adoption competent therapist here in Tampa Bay. I work with families either pre-adoption or post-adoption. I have background in working in child welfare. I have been a volunteer guardian ad litem, and I've also been the post-adoption specialist for 2 different counties here in the Tampa Bay area. And then I'm also the leader of the Tampa chapter for Transfiguring Adoption as well. So I pretty much have devoted my entire life to working with adopted families.
That's awesome. I was going to say, yeah, you're very involved. So do you mind me asking, what exactly kind of got you to want to get into adoption? Is that always something you've always wanted to do, or did you kind of have something that, took you off guard and wanted to get you involved in it?
So I have always been particularly interested in working with child welfare in general. My grandmother raised me. And so I already had kind of a different background than a lot of the kids that I went to school with. And so when I got older, I decided that I wanted to go work in child welfare. And when I went to college, graduated, my first job out the gate was a child welfare case manager. And I was working with a lot of kids that were returned from adoptions, like their adoption had failed or we were trying to get them adopted. So I started working with different professionals in the area and just learning about what they do. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. So I went to grad school and I got really lucky and I got an internship at a adoption agency that focuses on all their therapy with adoption families. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So that's always been something that's it was a little close to home with your grandmother raising you most of your life and kind of kick-started into wanting to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So this show, I kind of wanted to get a twist on it just because it's kind of a tie between adoption and mental health, and a lot of it was kind of with my experiences of, kind of going through adoption, and then I started getting anxiety and a lot of these other things. And then once I started talking to other adoptees, it seemed to have similar experiences with battling mental health, and I started doing some research on different stats and some of the stats I found were actually, I'm surprised that I don't have a lot of recent ones, at least I could find, but it was higher chances of social, intellectual, or emotional problems, higher chance of depression, anxiety, things like that. Now, I know you said you work with the families pre, post. I'm not sure how much if you do any one-on-ones with adoptees, but is it something that you've kind of noticed with helping other adoptees or their families? Is any type of those type of obstacles?
Yes. So I do work with adoptees individually as well. A lot of the work that I do is included with the family just because they need to be as involved, but that also includes doing some individual stuff with the adoptees, whether it's a really young child at the age of 2 or whether it's a 17-year-old. And what we have noticed is just that there are more mental health issues with children that are being adopted. And basically, there's a couple of different factors for that. Number one, people don't realize that prenatal stress really affects an infant's development. And we know that with a lot of our biological parents that they are under immense stress. Even in the best circumstances, they're still having to make the decision to place their child up for adoption. And this can be really stressful for them. If the child was placed in foster care, then there was likely some issues going on during their pregnancy, such as substance abuse, domestic violence, extreme poverty, and all of that goes against the child that's developing inside of that biological parent. And so when that happens, the child is born and they're already at a disadvantage. Yeah, and then also attachment with a lot of these babies, it starts in the womb. They know the smell of their mother. They know the voice. They know what to expect. And when they're born and they're immediately removed from their biological parent, that's really traumatic for them. It's kind of like a primal trauma that they already get, like as soon as they're born. And so, even for infants that were adopted as a newborn that a lot of people would expect to have no issues, there are some, things that happen over time that lets them know, hey, this is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, there's a lot of stuff there. I just started reading. Well, I'm getting about halfway through it now. I spent last weekend, this weekend, but it's called by Sherry Eldridge. It's called 20 Things I Wish My Adoptive Parents Knew, or 20 Questions. I always forget the name. It's a little lengthy, but there's a lot of things in there that she tackles that are exactly what you were saying. And I think in the beginning you were saying, I don't know if it broke up for a minute. So you're basically saying that if the mother is stressed prior to having the child, that stress could actually develop with the child, and then after birth. That's something I heard about too as well. So that's a common thing you were saying?
Yes, it's very common. Our parents that choose to place their child up for adoption, they don't do it very easily. There's usually some stress that's involved, and that really just affects the orbital and frontal cortex of the infant that's developing. And, that's the core part of our brain that is responsible for our social and our emotional control. It also affects, regulation and attachment. So, unfortunately, we haven't figured out a way to fix the stress while they're still in the womb. So once the child is born and has, started developing these issues, it's more of a reactive response instead of a preactive.
Gotcha. Would you say that because I know you kind of answered the question a little bit here, but would you say there's a common theme that you've noticed within adoptees or challenges they face more of? I know there's a slew of them that come up, but is there maybe one that stood out a little bit more? Is it like general anxiety, or I know a lot of stuff can play into that, but I didn't know if there was maybe one that stood out more than others.
There's a couple that I see a lot. There's a lot of learning disabilities, ADD and ADHD, and then also oppositional defiant disorder. But I think the reason that we see a lot of the ADD and the ADHD is a lot of the children that are adopted out of foster care. And these children are traumatized, just not only from being placed in a foster care, but living in our foster system that is broken. And trauma will often exhibit as ADHD when really it's the symptoms that they're having from the trauma. So if we treat the trauma, a lot of times we'll see their ADHD symptoms decrease.
Okay. I was actually going to say there was one thing, I don't know if there's any correlation here. It was one of the things in the book that stood out at least a lot for me, because I'm actually 27, and I know a lot of people say, they get older and they're still trying to figure themselves out. But one common thing I noticed is within myself and then talking to other adoptees is like identity, like searching for your identity. It feels like you're constantly searching for who you are as a person. And, I know even people that aren't adopted can relate to that, but there was something with adoptees. I talked to another man who's adopted, and I want to say he's in his late 50s, and he's like, I still feel a little lost. I still feel like I'm just searching and searching and searching for an identity, and I just never felt 100% secure, and I wasn't sure if that was something maybe that had popped up that with adoptees that you have spoken with, or...
Absolutely. The less that someone knows about their biological family, the more intense their anxiety tends to present. Just because they don't know what they came from, they don't know what makes them unique. And a lot of times that's the reason a lot of people want to connect with their biological families, is because, they want to feel that sense of closeness. And they want to get a lot of their questions answered.
Yeah.
And they hope that by connecting with that biological family, then that would fix their problem.
Now, is that something with families that you've spoken with? Is that something you recommend as far as, because I know that's also been a hot topic, is with adoptees that I've spoken with. I'm a curiosity. Curiosity kills. So I knew I wanted to go reach out eventually when that time came. I was very fortunate that I was able to meet my birth mother, my birth father, found out his sister and all that. But when I first started being kind of open about it and just talking and finding out there's so many people out there that are adopted, the first question I had was, are you curious? And with my surprise, a lot of them said no. As of late, I've noticed a change. A lot of them are more open to it. But is that something you encourage as far as saying that the child should be? I mean, when you're talking to a family, obviously, but I'm sure as an adoptee parent, that's a concern too on their end, is like, well, they don't want to lose the child, and with wanting to go back to the family. Is that something you suggest as a positive for an adoptee to search out and find that, just to, bring security to themselves?
I think that it is definitely a case-by-case scenario. It really depends on the safety of the biological family. If there were issues such as substance abuse, domestic violence, or sexual abuse, it's honestly up to the adoptive parents to allow contact with their child. However, you have to think about the safety of the child. If the parents have gotten the necessary treatment and they are in a really good spot and they know their child and the resiliency of their child, and the child has a therapeutic team that is supportive of that, then I think it's a good idea. However, the reality is that a lot of our adoptive parents don't have anything to do with the biological family, so they don't know. And so if they do have therapy services in place for that child and that child's wanting to reach out, I think that it should be considered, but it's not a 100%, treatment option that's going to fix everything.
Now, question, I know you had brought it up earlier that you said it was more foster care adoptees. Is that, do you know, because that's something I wish I would have looked it up. How many out of kids are there being adopted? How many are out of foster care? How many are out of, I forget what the technical terminology would be for, because I was adopted at 2 weeks old, but I wasn't in foster care, so I don't know what that's, like, the correct term for that is. But what would the differences between, like, adoptees that are in foster care and adoptees that are not foster care? Because I know did you say it tends to lean more foster care now? Is that where it's
the majority of infant adoptions are done.
Infant adoptions.
Infant adoptions are more privately done. The likelihood of you getting an infant through foster care is slim, just because that's what everybody wants. However, for older children, it tends to be through foster care.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I was curious on that. And another thing, I wasn't sure, this is stuff I want to do more research on just because I'm so fascinated by it, but as far as, do you think it would ever, and it may be now because it was 91 when I was adopted, so things have changed, but as far as therapy being a kind of a mandatory, more so for the family and the adoptee especially, is that something that's in that direction, or it just depends on states now or anything? Do you have any knowledge on that as far as adoptees?
I can't really speak on states. I can speak on Florida, and I know that there has been a big push on providing adoption competent therapy prior to an adoption finalizing, but ultimately it's up to that adoption worker to make sure that those services get in place. It is not mandated.
Okay. Gotcha.
And then not every state offers post-adoption support. We are very lucky in Florida that there are post-adoption support providers, so that if after finalization there are issues, then, there is a lengthy amount of providers that can provide that support. It just might be a little wait just because the demand is so high and the providers are so few. When you take into consideration the amount of children that need our services.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I went to therapy when I was younger, but it was post-divorce, and I was a little bit more quiet and, didn't want to say much. And then I went, I want to say close to 2 years ago now. And it was life-changing. It completely just changed my life, my viewpoint. I was like, why does not everybody go to therapy? You know, even if you feel like you're fine, I was like, it's just a great outlet. I feel like you learn about yourself, so I'm a huge advocate of it, and it kind of made me be like, gosh, I feel like there needs to be therapy for everyone. But out of curiosity, what's for a family that's looking to adopt, and what kind of like advice do you give to them as kind of a precursor to adopting, to kind of help them along in that process?
My recommendation is that they take a intensive parenting course, because a lot of our adoptive parents, they have experienced parenting a biological child, but parenting a biological child and parenting an adopted child are two different things. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the biggest things that we see as clinicians working with these families, is that they have the same expectations for their adopted child as their biological child. And while that's great in some circumstances, the fact of the matter is they are not the same, and you cannot treat them the same when it comes to discipline or parenting styles. So it's really good to have a plethora of techniques to use whenever you're dealing with your adopted child, and also establishing a support system. A lot of our adoptive families don't have adequate supports needed in order to navigate the system. And, when you are connected with other adoptive parents, they understand what you're going through. Whereas biological family or just friends that have never had to deal with some of the adopted children behaviors, they can't relate. They're like, well, just do this, or why don't you do that? And it's not helpful. So having a really good educated support system is key.
Okay, definitely. I really like what you said there. And just play devil's advocate, because I'm sure there may be some people thinking it that might not understand. But the big question there, I guess, would probably be like, why? When you went into how an adoptee child or an adopting child and then a biological child need to be raised in different manners. For anybody that's kind of like saying why, I know it's kind of probably like a super long answer, but is there kind of a short of exactly why they need to be raised different in different areas as far as discipline and so on?
Their brain is just different. Their brain, even if they had a mom, a biological parent who loved them and wanted the best for them and chose to make the decision to place that child for adoption, that mother still experienced a tremendous amount of stress. And that child still experienced, the break of attachment from their biological parent. So just right out the gate, there's already differences right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, I really like that. That's funny. It's actually something I was reading in that book I had mentioned, with a lot about that, about the mourning of that, and that how you need to go through a grieving process and to really grieve the loss of that. So that's kind of the first experience the child's having is loss right away.
Absolutely.
Which I thought was really fascinating, because especially when you think back to anything that you're, probably under 5 or 6, you kind of don't remember, but it still can carry with you. So.
Absolutely. The first 36 months of a child's life are the most important. Mm-hmm. So when you have a child, especially a child that's been in foster care and has had multiple placements, bounced around and multiple caregivers, that's just so detrimental to their sense of feeling safe and secure and attached to a caregiver. And it can affect them through life. And then, even with an infant being adopted, that's still where they were for the last 9 months is no longer the same. It's not the same smell. It's not the same voice. So that definitely has an effect.
No, absolutely. And then I guess since you did say earlier that you could speak with adoptees one-on-one, what kind of advice or solutions usually do you suggest to an adoptee that's facing, once they start kind of facing some mental obstacles to try to grow as a person?
A lot of the times what they do is they have a lot of their anxiety is just about them not knowing where they came from. And so if it's possible, I always try to get them to get their records from when they were placed in care or when they were adopted. And, we'll go through it together and we'll try to get as many of their questions answered as we possibly can. And then, we'll talk about, if it's going to be in their best interest to attempt to find their biological family, and making sure that their expectations are clear and that they haven't built up the reunion to something that it's most likely not going to be.
Yeah, setting expectations, so they don't get too far ahead. Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of kids that are adopted, they create this wonderful mindset of their biological parents. They're going to greet them with the tears and open arms and everything's going to be perfect. And the reality is that's just not the case. And so that can be a real letdown for, these kids and adults that, have spent the majority of their formative years imagining it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I understand. And I think also I wasn't sure if you had worked with anybody that has also gone through the process of reaching out and developing a relationship and then have to play, because one thing I've had as a challenge for me is kind of playing a little bit of a juggling act, because I have my adoptive parents that I love dearly that are my mother and father. They raised me, and then I was blessed enough to also be able to develop a relationship with my birth father as well, which has been great, and find out his mom, my birth grandmother, and have a relationship with her. And, you get all these people and it's awesome, but then it's still like this juggling, and you want to be respectful. And that also can cause a lot of stress and anxiety too on top of it. And I wasn't sure if you had worked with people that have also gone through that process of going to meet, but then going, okay, but how do I also balance now going through that process as well?
Yes, I have had a few people that have met with their biological family and was able to develop a healthy relationship with them. And one of the things that I like to point out is that whenever a parent decides to add an adopted child to their family, when they already have a biological child, their heart is able to expand in order to provide love to all of the children. And even as an adult or an older child who wants to meet their adopted or their biological family, their heart's able to do the same thing. They are able to meet their biological mother, but still love their adopted parent. And I think that one of the most important things is that there's just open lines of communication between the child and their adopted family about this. They are going to need the support of the adopted family and, the understanding of just because I want to find my birth mother doesn't mean I don't love you. And that's where I would recommend probably some family therapy to take place.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I just started thinking about, I've noticed over the years, like, they can be uncomfortable conversations, but sometimes those are the best ones that help you grow and, get closer together. So I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any downside to having a larger family that loves you and cares for you, as long as they're in an appropriate space to provide that. Sometimes, these are the biological parents aren't. They're still using drugs and, they're still dealing with their own trauma, and they're not able to be that supportive person that you would like to have in your life. And, that's okay sometimes. Sometimes that's what you need in order to, put it aside and say, okay, I got what I needed, so now it's time for me to move on.
No, absolutely. Well, perfect. I think that about wraps up my questions. I really appreciate you so much to be willing to jump on and talk about all this. And it's just, I want to continue to kind of spread some awareness to, adoptees and mental health, and just an area that hopefully people can open up about. So that's just something I've always wanted to help with.
All right. Well, absolutely. If you ever have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Pattie Moore and thank her once again for coming on the show and being able to get in depth on mental health, adoptees, and all the knowledge that she has in that area. I know I learned a lot, and I really hope you guys are able to take away something from that podcast. So again, thank you so much, Pattie Moore. I greatly appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoy and you have a phenomenal week. We'll see you next Wednesday.